All right. Well, a number of years ago, I had a friend who was a campus ministry staff member at the college where I was going to school. So I started out at a branch campus of Penn State University, and his name was Bill, and Bill worked in the field of campus ministry. And about the middle of my sophomore year, Bill did something that was really unique. He's the only person I ever knew who made a decision like this. He asked everybody to start calling him a new name. Now, that's an interesting thing to have happen. I don't know if you've ever had anybody who one day you knew them as this, and then they said, I want you to start calling me this over here. And he was making a name shift from Bill to Will. Now, Bill to Will is not an enormous jump. They all have the base of William, right? But it was different to start calling him Will. And so we asked him as students who he had influenced us spiritually, okay, Will, we'll call you that. Why do you want your name to be different? And his answer to the question was that God has done something new in my life, and I want to have a name that every time I hear it, I'll remember what God has done. You see, Will had gone through a very painful divorce in his life. And coming on the other side of that, he kind of felt like, I think maybe that God was just done with him, that God wasn't going to continue to use him in some way. And he felt like God had shown him that he had a new future for him, and God was going to continue to work in his life. And so he wanted people to call him Will so he could always remember the Lord's goodness in his life. Now, some of you are going to go, I need to change my name, all right? Now, I'm not encouraging you to change your name, but I just want you to know that if you do for a reason like that, that you need to understand that you are actually following a biblical precedent. In the Bible, there are 6 significant name changes in the Bible. Every one of them are initiated for the reasons of causing a person to re-identify with a new purpose that God has in their life. So here are the big 6 name changes in the Bible. You have Abram that got shifted to Abraham. And God changed his name because Abraham needed to always remember that he was called to be the father of a new nation. And Abraham's wife got shifted from Sarai to Sarah because she needed to be reminded that the day was going to come when even in her old age she was going to give birth to a child who would be the first child of this new nation. Then their grandson Jacob had his name shifted to Israel because that would be the name of the new nation. And so all these people were having their names changed by God. Then we move forward into the book of Joshua. A lot of people don't know this one. Hosea was changed to Joshua. Moses actually changed his name because the word Joshua meant the Lord saves. And so Joshua was meant to hear his name and to always remember that God would use him to save Israel because he was going to go into the promised land and lead them. You move into the New Testament. You have Saul who was persecuting the church, and Jesus meets him onto the road to Damascus, and Jesus changes his name. He ends up becoming Paul so that he could re-identify as a missionary who would advance the gospel. In the Gospels, you have Simon, who was a fisherman, and Jesus spoke to Simon and said, Simon, I'm going to change your name to Petros, which we call Peter. The word Petros meant the rock, right? And so he said, you are going to be the rock on which I build the church. So Peter was meant to leave the fishing life behind and to always identify with this new calling of being a founder of the church, being a leader of the early church. So just so you know, what Will was doing actually had biblical precedent to it. Sometimes a new name helps us to identify so that every time we hear it, we remember what God has asked us to do, what calling God has put on our lives. And so today we are changing our name. The name Pathway Community Church goes back to 2015. We planted the church in 2016, but in 2015 we came here to the area and we pulled a group of people together, and I came with a list of 20 names, and I had some good ones on there. And I thought for sure some of I had a couple I was really excited about. And I'm not making the story up. The last name on my list was Pathway Community Church. And we go with this group of people in the area, and we said, help us to understand what name is going to connect in this area. Now you have to understand, we were coming from the suburbs of Indianapolis, so we were thinking like suburban people. And suburban people don't think like small town people, let me tell you that. And so when we went through the name list, when we got to Pathway Community Church, they shot down every cool name. I had Greek terms for names, and I had cool action verbs for names. They shot them all down, and that Pathway Community Church came, and all these hands went up in the air. That's the one we want, right? And I said, okay, well, if that's what it means to be a missionary who's going to reach this small town, then that's the name we're going to pick. And so that's how the name started back in 2015. And today we're laying that down. And the reason we are laying it down is because we're going to pick something else up that I think God wants us to embrace. And the reason we're going to pick it up is so that we always, always remember what God has asked us to do as a church. So I'm going to pause for just a second, and because I realize this is a very significant Sunday in the life of our church. And I'm going to pray, and we're going to ask God to bless this, because I realize that this can create some anxiety. I don't want it to do that. I actually want us to have a joyful embrace of where we're going as a church. So let me just go ahead and pray. Lord Jesus, we ask you to just be in this message with me. God, I have something very important to communicate, and I don't want to fumble the ball in doing that this morning. And so would you help me to speak with clarity and conviction? And God, if there's any anxiety in this room over a name change, if there's any maybe bitterness or even a sense of anger that may exist in some people, I just pray that you would take that spirit out of the room and let us have a spirit of joy and an embrace over where you are taking us as a church. You have a plan for our church, and we get to embrace it today. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome. Well, I need to unpack for you, first of all, why we're changing it. There's a primary reason and a secondary reason. The secondary reason why we are changing the name of our church is because what we discovered over these last 7.5 years is that there is a lot of digital competition for the word pathway. It's all over the place. So there are pathways all over the country. So I read a statistic one time, I don't know if it's true, that there's something like 400,000 incorporated churches in the United States. So with 400,000 churches, it's impossible to find names that nobody else has ever thought of before. You have overlap. You just have it no matter what you do. And there's a lot of overlap with Pathway. So it has been a common experience over the last 7 years to have people come here and to say to us, hey, I had trouble finding you online. How do I find your Facebook page? I put Pathway in the search bar, and I get all these churches. I go to Google, and people don't think to put Pathway and the word Marietta in there. They get all these churches. And so people have reported to us before that they have worshiped for several weeks online thinking they were with us, and they were a church in another state. That's happened. 2 weeks ago, somebody came to me in the lobby, totally true story, I promise you, and they're a newer family, and they said, Pastor, could you go check our giving? We just gave our first gift. We weren't sure if we were on the right website for the church. That's a little bit of a problem, right? Okay, so there is a branding issue that's a problem. But that is a secondary issue, because eventually people figure out where to find our website and where to find our Facebook page and where to find our YouTube channel and how to get to the giving link. Like, people figure it out eventually. So that's not a big enough reason to change due to something as big as the name change of a church. The bigger, far, far, far more important reason is that God has unveiled, we believe, our church leadership believes that God has unveiled a purpose for us that we are supposed to walk into, and we need to remember, always, always remember, we need to shift our identity to align with his purpose for our church. So I want to make an argument to you that might be a little confusing to you, but I think you'll get it if you follow along with me here, that every church has a mission and a purpose, and those things are different from one another. I know that probably sounds a little strange at first. Just follow along with me here. I think that every church in the world has the same mission. It doesn't matter if you start a church, in an underground house church in China, or if you're starting a church in a persecuted part of the world, or if you're starting a mega church in the suburbs of Dallas, or you're starting a church in Canada or South America. Wherever you start a church, churches basically have the same mission to them. We all kind of universally have the same mission, which is that we're all supposed to get lost people saved, and saved people pastored, and pastored people trained, and trained people sent. It really doesn't matter what the context of the church is. If it's meeting in a home, or if it's meeting in a big building, or if it's meeting outdoors, or it doesn't matter. We're all trying to do these four things. We're trying to see people move from death to life. People, when they find Jesus, we want them to get pastored through their issues and their problems and get healing from the Lord. After they get healing, we want people to discover their gifts and understand what God put inside of them, and they get trained in how to use those gifts for the glory of God. And then eventually, every church should be pushing people out into ministry. So that should be happening universally. Every church in the world shares the same mission. So here at Pathway, the way we say that, you just heard it this morning when Haley was on the platform, we say, hey, we're here to help you to know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. All we're saying with that phrase is we're here to help lost people be saved people be pastored, pastored people be trained, and trained people be sent. It's the universal mission of the church. Now, churches have all kinds of different ways in how we say it. It's the same mission. But what is not the same from church to church to church is the purpose of the church. I believe that God has a unique, very distinct purpose for every church. So while one thing is the same for all of us, another thing is distinctly different for all of us. So every church that exists in the world today was originally God's idea. Do you know that? This church was not my idea. It became my idea in 2014 when God put a calling on our lives. It existed eons into the past because God knew it was coming, and God had a reason why he called some church planters to move here to do this. God dreams up a church. God has a reason for a church. God then selects leaders and calls them to get it started so that his purposes can be executed, so his purposes can be played out in the world. So an example of this would be, I have a friend who started a church that is very, very focused on the addiction community. Laser focused in on people who are coming out of addiction or people who are actively in addiction, just focused on that. Now, that wasn't his idea, that was God's idea. Because God wanted a church that would reach that population of people. Every church. Now, that is not necessarily our calling. It doesn't mean we don't care for people in addiction. It's just not our laser focus because it's not the primary purpose that God put on us. Every church has a primary reason why God created it, why God thought it up in the first place. So we see this in the Bible. Okay, so if you go to the book of Acts, what you'll discover in the Bible is that there's all kinds of different churches being started, and there's a different reason for every one of them. So the church in Jerusalem is the first church. It started after the Holy Spirit was poured out, and Peter then stood up and preached a sermon, and 3,000 people came to Christ. And then over the next 20 years, that church grew to tens of thousands of people. Now, God's purpose for that church was, number one, that it would be the church that birthed all the others, that it would get everything started. But number two, that church was an anchor church to the Jews in Israel. It was the mothership Jewish church. So all across the nation of Israel, people would have looked at that church and said, hey, let's follow the lead of that church in Jerusalem. Didn't matter what part of Israel they lived in. It was the flagship church. So that church became the one where there were major councils. All the major leadership was in Jerusalem in the book of Acts. And there were councils where they tried to sort through their theology to distribute that theology to the rest of the church. That was the purpose of the church in Jerusalem. But that was not the purpose of all the other churches that got planted. So another example would be the church in Philippi, which while it had the same mission as the church in Jerusalem, it also was trying to get lost people saved, and saved people pastored, and pastored people trained, and trained people sent. It had a totally unique purpose to it. So in Acts chapter 16, the Apostle Paul, he's dreaming of planting churches. He's with a ministry team. He wants to go to these provinces over here to start new churches. And we're told in Acts 16 that the Spirit of Jesus stopped him from planting some churches. Now that's a little confusing. Why would Jesus stop a church from getting planted? That doesn't make any sense. Unless you're sitting in Jesus' seat and he has a distinct purpose for a church that needs to be planted over here. And so Jesus redirected him. Here's what happened. In Acts 16, Paul had a dream, and there was this man in the region of Macedonia begging him to come where he was supposed to go. So he got stopped from going one direction, and then a dream tells him there's an open door in another direction. So they travel across the sea. They go to the region of Macedonia. When they get there, the first city they go into is Philippi, which is a major port city on the Aegean Sea. And it's there that Paul meets Lydia. She's worshiping down by the sea. He leads Lydia to Christ, and then he and Lydia and their ministry team and her friends all start a church together, and now a church begins to grow in Philippi. Now that church did not have the same purpose as the church in Jerusalem. That church was a major port city. So part of God's purpose for it was that ships from all over the world would be coming into that port. People would then be led to Christ in the city of Philippi. They would get back on their ships, and they would carry the gospel right back with them to where they were going. So God had a purpose. They were to be a city that was leading sailors to Christ. A church that was leading sailors to Jesus. That was a purpose that God had for them. Jerusalem didn't have to worry about that. Another part of the purpose of that one in Philippi is that it would be later on that the Apostle Paul would write a letter back to that church, which would become the book of Philippians in our New Testament. So God had a book of the Bible designed out of this church. He didn't have that for Jerusalem. There's no letter to Jerusalem that we have now as a book of our New Testament. You see, every church has the same mission, but every church has a distinct and unique purpose, a reason why God thought it up in the first place. And so what we all have to do as church leaders is figure out both, not just the mission, but also the purpose. Why did God put us here? Now, there's all kinds of reasons for that, and there aren't reasons that are better than others. Some churches are meant to get really focused on people in poverty. Some churches are meant to have a transformative impact on their school system. Some churches are meant to become mega churches. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why God creates churches, and this is why when you walk into them, each church has a different flavor to it. Well, we all have the same mission. We've got a unique flavor because there's something God asked that church to do. We got to figure it out. So here at our church, we believe that God has given an answer to that question. And so you need to know that the heartbeat of our church is to reach small towns. We think that God initiated something on us to reach more small towns. So we wrote down this purpose statement to try to capture this. Our staff got together and created this statement just to be able to know how to say it. And we said, we think that God has basically called us to catalyze a movement of churches that would transform small towns. The Lord is inviting us on a journey of starting churches in smaller places. Not big suburban areas, not big cities, smaller places. God's inviting us on this journey. Now, here at our church, I believe that we are having a transformative impact on our town. We are a part of a group of churches. There are a group of life-giving churches that are in this town. We are one among them. We're not the only churches doing good work in our town. And we're part of a group of life-giving churches that are bringing life to our town. So part of the way that we're bringing life to our town is that people who are far from God are coming to know Him, and lots of people are getting saved, and those people are then getting pastored, and people are learning their gifts and learning how to use them for the kingdom, and people are getting deployed in ministry. So that's part of how we're having a transformative impact. But another way that churches have a transformative impact on their towns is to just flat out love their city, love their town, and help them when they have need. So pause for a moment. I'm going to take a 2-minute diversion off the message. We have an opportunity right now to do that. So we just went through what I'm told. Somebody told me that this is a top 12 historic flood in Marietta. I don't know if that's true or not, but it definitely was a big one, wasn't it? And so what we're going to do, guys, we're going to actually work on loving our town well. We're going to work on flood cleanup today. So I want to invite you to get activated to do something to love your neighbors. We are going to go down to Phillips School at 6 o'clock, and I want you to bring all the cleaning supplies you have. I want you to bring bleach, spray bottles, scrubs, gloves, just clothes you don't mind getting dirty. And we're going to literally just walk down into where the flooded area was at and knock on doors and say, do you need help scrubbing walls? Because there's going to be mud on the ground and mud up walls all over places. And we're going to do this because this is part of what it means to be a life-giving church that is having a transformative impact on its town. So childcare is available. If you have young kids, don't let it stop you. You can drop them off here at the church at 5:45. We've got a whole team of people who are going to watch the kiddos so that you can go, and we'll end at 8 o'clock. Now, we're not going to fix all the problems by 8 p.m., but we're going to make a dent. Because that's what it means to be a church who has a transformative impact on your town. So will you guys join me at 6 o'clock tonight? This is where you go, yes, Pastor, we'll join you. Yes. Don't let me do it by myself, all right? Come on down to Phillips School at 6 p.m. Let's go help our neighbors tonight, okay? So when we say that we want to start churches in other places, this is what we want to start. We want to start churches that are carrying out the mission of the church, but also churches that are loving their towns well, caring for their neighbors well. That's how we have a transformative impact on those places. But I want to unpack more of why this is so important. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data. For those of you who like data, this one will be helpful to you, to understand the dynamics of what's happening in the church planting world. So here is a study that was done by Lifeway Research back in 2019. So this is a 5-year-old study. Lifeway Research looked around the country and they said, okay, we want to figure out how many churches are being started new in the United States and how many are closing down. And what they found in 2019 was that roughly 4,500 churches had permanently closed their doors in 2019. Roughly 3,000 churches had opened new in 2019. Now, just that number alone should tell you that we've got a problem, don't we? There's a problem in our country when that's happening. But the problem is probably actually worse than you think it is. So let me give you a little bit of bad news, okay? I live in the church planting world. I am a church planter. I know lots of church planters. Pastor Jesse and I are part of a leadership team of a church planting network called the 99 Network. So on the side, while we're pastoring this church, we're also helping to deploy other churches around the country. So I'm in the church planter world. I love people who start churches, okay? And so let me tell you what I know is happening in the church world, because I'm around so many of them. The vast majority of churches, if you ask where are those 3,000 churches getting started in the world, they are getting started in the suburbs of major cities or in major college towns. That's where they're getting started. And I see this because I know so many who are launching in those places. When Jana and I lived in Indianapolis, we lived in a suburb called Fishers. Fishers was exploding in growth. It was projected to go from 40,000 to 90,000 people in 5 years. It was one of the fastest growing suburbs in the United States, outside of Indy. Church planters were showing up in droves to plant there, as they should have been, because there was a massive population increase going on. I mean, churches were full, churches were big, there were mega churches all around the suburbs around us. So we were constantly getting mailers from new church planters who were showing up, because what they did is they researched the demographic data. Where are people showing up? Hey, they're showing up in the suburbs of Indy. Let's go there to start our church. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing that people are doing that. But guess where they're not showing up? They're not showing up in droves in the places where the churches are actually closing. So where are those 4,500 churches closing? Well, my argument is I think they're closing right around us. That's where they're closing. So in the church world, there's a danger zone. When a church crosses below about 40 people in weekly attendance, they're in the danger zone. Because at 40 people, that's like the bare minimum number of people that you need to sustain the salary of a pastor and to sustain the needs of the facility that you meet in. Like that is just enough money to have a pastor in a building. And what happens when you go below 40, you can live out your life as a church for quite some time, because a lot of churches have endowments or they may have cash in the bank, and so they can survive for a while below 40. But eventually the cash runs out. And when the cash runs out, you either can't pay the pastor or you can't take care of the roof on the building anymore. And that's when churches close. And so what I'm trying to help you to understand is that there's not an even distribution of where these 4,500 churches are closing. They are closing in places like the places where we live. Now, I don't have a hard statistic to give you on this. I just have observational data. So I know a lot of pastors around the Mid-Ohio Valley. I've met a lot of church leaders over the last 7 years. So this is my observation. I'm guessing that somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of our churches in the Mid-Ohio Valley are in the danger zone right now. They cross below the 40 threshold. So I need you to really think about this. We had better get ready for what's coming. There is a church closure crisis coming to the Mid-Ohio Valley. It's coming. And it's not just coming here, it's coming in small towns across America. And so do you see the problem? The problem is that the new churches are getting started where the greatest population growth is happening, but most of the churches that are closing in places like ours. That creates a problem, doesn't it? So do you think that God might have had a strategy in mind a long, long time ago when he dreamed up a church? Not me. And he said, I have a purpose for a church. I want to put a church in place that's going to be focused on that problem. And it's going to be trying to get churches started in the places where other people aren't showing up to start them, to fill in the gap, to fill in the need, to bring life-giving churches to the places where churches are closing the most. You think God might have had that strategy? You see, I think that's exactly what God's strategy was, and I think that is the reason why God birthed our church in the first place. And it's the reason why he called us here. And so, what we're trying to do is we want to attack this problem. And so I need you to know that we're actually doing that this fall. So about a year ago, we were given a building in the Beverly area. We were handed a building of a church that was one of those 4,500 that closed down. And that building changed our strategy on how to do this. And we said, hey, rather than trying to start churches in places like high school auditoriums or places like the Reno Business Park where we started this one, what if we started them in the buildings that are going to come available as the churches are in this stage of closure? Why not go to the buildings that God's people has already built and repurpose the building to put a new life-giving church in it? And so this fall, that's what we're going to try to do. So if you want to be on the absolute front lines of ministry, if you want to be where all the action is at in ministry, you join our launch team this fall. And you make the church, the extension of our church that's going to be in Beverly, make that your church. And you will be on the front lines of a brand new church. You get to experience the action. You get to be a church planter. And so this is where we're going. But I don't think that's the only building we're going to be given. I think that God is positioning us to start giving us more opportunities like this, to start life-giving churches in the infrastructure that God's people have already built. This is our purpose. So thank you. So listen, because of that, a name change serves us well, not just because people have trouble finding us in the digital space, but it serves us well because like everybody in the Bible who had their name changed, when we hear the name, we will go, I remember the calling of God. I remember the purpose. It will keep it in front of us so that we can march where God is inviting us to go. That is the primary reason. That is a way bigger, more important reason than just digital competition. It's because we get to remember what God's asked us to do. So roughly 6-ish months ago, we initiated a process. We brought a team together, a team of 8 people. I was a member of the team, but this was really a collaborative effort. And we started down this path of how do we rename our church? And we went on that journey for a while, and one of the things that we did is we looked at what were the kinds of names that other people were calling their churches. And so what's really, really popular in the church world right now is to give high action verb words to names. Okay, so here are some examples of churches that recently have been planted. Accelerate Church, Motion City Church, Exponential Church. You'll hear things like Renovation Church, Experience Church. That's a really popular way to name churches right now. And so we toyed with that. We said, hey, should we take a name like that and apply it to ours? But the problem we came up with, we said, that doesn't make sense because, like, if we go to Caldwell to start a church, people aren't accelerating in Caldwell. There's not tons of motion in Caldwell, right? No knock on the people in Caldwell. There's not much motion here in Marietta either. Guys, in the small town context that we're going to, like, people have chosen a slower, quieter life. People have chosen a slower pace of life. You realize we've all chosen this, right? Like every one of us in this room has chosen to be over an hour drive away from a Target. We've chosen that. You could go to Columbus right now. You can have everything at your fingertips right now. You've chosen this, right? Don't complain about it. So to put a term to a church that implies big growth, big acceleration, something like that, it doesn't fit the context, right? Of the kind of people we're trying to reach. So the team said, okay, well then what are the kinds of things, what are the phrases or the words that matter in the places where we might start churches at some point? And so we came up with a few examples. Small town, hometown, local. We said these are the kinds of words that matter. So how many times have you had this experience where you meet somebody who you've never met before and you find out you have a common connection and you name a person and they go, oh, I know that person too. Oh, it's a small town. Everybody kind of knows everybody around here. Right? Like we say that in our town, don't we? I mean, the hometown pride is crazy in small places. I mean, we are passionate about our football teams and our high schools and our basketball teams. I mean, if you're from Williamstown, you are from Williamstown, right? If you are from Beverly, it is the Fort Fry, whatever you people call yourselves out there, right? I mean, you are passionate about your team. So the hometown thing matters, right? Local, people are passionate about supporting each other locally. So have you ever wondered why, like you can go to Da Vinci's and you've got this big old wait at Da Vinci's and you go to Applebee's, you get right in. Well, it's partly because people are passionate about supporting their local businesses. Listen, I can go to Starbucks, and there are many times I'm literally the only car in line at Starbucks. And then I go down to Stoke, and it is backed up 89 cars to Phillips School. Why is that? Well, it's partly because there's a passion to support our local people and our local businesses. And this is why our town right now is mobilizing. You're going to see people all over town mobilizing to help their neighbors this week to get their businesses and their homes cleaned up. So we said, okay, we've got to have a name that fits the context of the people. So you guys ready to hear the name? You all excited about that? I've held you on long enough. You got to watch a video to figure it out.
Every church has to ask itself, what has God asked us to do? There are universal things that all churches in all places at all time periods are supposed to be doing. Things like helping lost people be saved and saved people be pastored, pastored people be trained, and trained people be sent. But let's get more specific than that. What has God uniquely asked us to do that is different from what He has asked other churches to do? Now that's an important question, because the answer to it defines the mission and vision of our church. Friends, we believe that God has asked us specifically to partner with Him in reaching small towns for Jesus. Did you know that small towns really matter to God? Yes, the world puts its focus on major cities like New York or Los Angeles or Miami, but let's not forget that God is absolutely at work in small places too. His Spirit is moving in places like Marietta, Ohio, every bit as much as it's moving in the metropolises of our world. God loves the people of small towns like crazy, and He's inviting us to reach Him. Friends, we're heading on a journey together. Over the next few years, you're going to see our church make every effort to bring the gospel to the places that are overlooked by the world. We're going to start planting campuses in places like Beverly, where the Fort Fried pride runs deep and the blue and red colors can be found on just about everyone. I want you to dream of a day when our campus is reaching Caldwell, where the light of Jesus is breaking through to the passionate folks who are cheering their heart out for Redskins football on Friday nights. Or imagine a day where we've been able to start life-giving churches in places like Mineral Wells and down into the small towns of Appalachia. Don't you see it? This is our unique calling from God. This is what Jesus has invited us to do. So church, in light of this calling from the Lord, we opened up a process 6 months ago to reconsider what the name of our church should be. And the primary, number one reason why we started this process was because we wanted to identify ourselves with this calling. God used name changes in the Bible to shift people's identities. After God's call had hit their lives, Abram became Abraham and Jacob became Israel. Saul became Paul and Simon became Peter. God used name changes in the Bible so His servants would never forget what He'd asked them to do, and that's why we're changing the name of our church. So today, I'm proud to share with you our new name of our church. Now let's go reach small places and spread the fame of Jesus together.
Welcome to Local Church. Man, we are so excited. We are so excited about this name. We believe that this name is going to allow us to be able to reach all the small towns around us, anywhere that we want to go, any place that we want to help bring life-giving churches. This name is going to go with us all the distance. We're so excited about this name. Now, guys, Pastor Ryan got to give you all the inspiration, and I get to give you all the really boring logistics. But I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to do my best, okay? So some things you're going to want to know. First of all, this is the new name of the church, Local Church. This is our new branding package. So all the logos, all the different colors that we use or that we're going to use in our branding. We've also renamed our children's ministry. It's now Local Kids. So you can see all the branding there for the kids stuff. They're really excited to be able to use those cool colors. Some other kind of things I just want to let you know about from a financial standpoint. I know you're all wondering where you should write your checks. You should be wondering that. So from now on, for the next probably 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, you can still write checks to Pathway or Local Church. We've already talked to the banks. The bank knows that we're in the process of doing the name change, so they're all cool with that. But we want to go ahead and start kind of transitioning over to writing checks to Local Church because that is the new name of the church. But for the next couple weeks, you'll be okay. As far as social media goes, we are not, you don't have to follow anything new on social media. So after this service is over, we are going to start the process of changing all of our social media handles, all of our names. Now, one of the things that we found out in this process is it's not as simple as just like going in, pushing a button, save, right? Like, it's a pretty long process. So it could happen in a few hours. It could happen in a few weeks. So over the next few weeks, you're going to see our social media handles and names change. But one thing we want to tell you about, and I really want your help with on, is we are starting a brand new text message news feed called Local News. So what I want you to do is I want you to text Local News, all one word, to 21,000. That will help you to join in to the platform that we're going to use to give all the announcements for the church. So all the things that are happening, all the great events that are coming up, anything that's happening in our church, in the life of our church, this is the number one way we're going to get that information pushed out. So many of you right now have your phones out, and I'm so grateful for that. So go ahead right now and text Local News to 21,000 so that you can be in that group. I also want to tell you about the website. So our website is going to be changing to match the new name and the new color schemes. Our URL, our username, our web address, that's also changing. So from now on, it will be www.lchurch.org. We're going to start the migration for our website today. It probably will take about 24 hours for it to fully propagate. But just so you know, it will start changing today. After this service is over, our staff will start having new email addresses. So our email addresses for our staff team will be the lchurch.org email addresses. Also, for all of the apps and databases that we use as a church, all the technology that you guys are part of, so Planning Center or Church Center, the way that you check in on your phones, things like that, none of that stuff, you don't have to join anything new. That stuff will automatically change over the next few weeks. You'll see those things change to our new name. So there's nothing you need to do there. Starting this week, we're going to start the physical transformation of our space. So we're going to put new signage up inside and outside of the building. We're going to change all the connection cards and things inside the room so that it matches the new name. And then the thing that you should be the most excited about is we have a free t-shirt for everybody that came here today. Yeah, get excited about free stuff. So in the back of the room, there's 2 tables set up so that we can have 2 lines going. So here's the deal. We have a t-shirt and a wristband for everybody that has the new name, the new logo, all that stuff on it. We want to give one to everybody. But here's the thing, is it's possible that we will run out of sizes, and that's okay. I have some clipboards back there. All you need to do is write your name and the size that you need on that clipboard. We're going to put in another order today, so that we have those t-shirts for you by next week. Okay, so don't fret. If they don't have your size back there, just write your name down, and we'll get you all set up. Now, I also want to let you know that in the kids ministry, they're also giving out t-shirts to all the kids. So the kids are going to have some great, cool new t-shirts with all that new logo on and branding on it. So they'll be really excited to have that. If you would, have your kids wear it to school tomorrow. Take a picture of them, send it to us, because I think that'd be pretty cool to get that all online. Last but not least, I want to let you know that we've created an online store. It's a place for you to buy additional merchandise, additional swag for the church. We used a local guy, a guy out of Mineral Wells that has a company that does this. So we're really excited to be able to support a local business and at the same time give you guys opportunities to buy additional merchandise, other shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, things like that. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be adding more things to that. Okay? Sound good, guys? You guys excited? Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, if you're new here, I'd love for you to take your connection card out to Guest Central in the lobby. We have that special gift for you for saying thank you for being here with us today. So please stop by Guest Central on your way out. Otherwise, grab your shirts, and we'll see you next week.